just matters when we are touching. Kiss me, hold me close to you, don't let me go. When we are touch, me baby, like I feel like them make we touch slowly. Nobody else, no matter, just the only. Plus your body feel like heaven. Not even a tear up blouse, so holy. All of me friends know you are me honey. If you no believe, ask DJ Kenny or ask Sunshine when me tell her about you when we go home. She, baby, lay down, down, down. Nothing no wrong if we touch funny down, down, down. We deep in a love now fall out, out, out. Listen the words that come from my mouth, words that come from my mouth.
You have the ever-blessed good love. I gotta go with you, and I'm in love with you like wow. The ever-blessed good love. Gotta go with you, and I'm in love with you like wow. The ever-blessed good love. I gotta go with you.
The concept of flattening the curve was intended to ensure that critical systems like the healthcare system did not collapse. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have been spared the worst. However, it is not yet the time to drop our guard. Let's continue to adhere to all health and safety protocols and look out for those in your circle, the elderly and the challenged. It is also very important at this time to guard your own well-being. Plan and execute the mental breaks that you so deserve. Return to your neglected hobbies and the things that gave you pleasure, and tune to your Tambrin for the music.
Tobago, you getting used tires from as low as $180 and new tires from as low as $360. But what kind of pipe thing is this, boy?
We've got those Piper prices that's convenient for every customer. Only at Rifle Master Tire Center, located inside George Street near Penny Savers, Canaan, Tobago.
Call the Rifle Master hotline at 660-TIRE. That's 660-TYRE.
Follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
It's real pipe thing with them, boy.
Rifle Master the tire. Alex, where the tires them cheap. Tires for your van, for your car, for your Jeep.
Rifle Master, official dealers for Kumho and Toyo tires. Rifle Master Tire Center.
But me never worry, tire Alex have it under control. That's why me and deal with the proof.
Radio Tambrin 92.7 presents Talk Night. Talk Night. Tuesday night from 8 p.m. Talk Night. The premiere program takes place this Tuesday from 8 p.m. Join our guest educator, historian, and civil society activist, Kamau Akili. Talk Night. Talk Night. On Radio Tambrin. Premieres this Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Tune in or link to our Radio Tambrin's Facebook page or YouTube channel. Let's think through and discuss the facts.
Want to have happy pets? Well, don't worry. The professionals are here. Healthy Pets exclusive boutique and farm animal supplies, located at Panam Building, Crown Point, is ready to serve you. Check us out for a variety of gorgeous accessories, fashionista outfits, grooming essentials, toys, potty training supplies, medication, and much more for your furry friends. Great prices on feeds and chows. It's a pet's world at Healthy Pets. Open weekdays 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Sundays and public holidays 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Come in, we'll make you feel happy too. Delivery options available. Healthy Pets exclusive pet boutique and farm animal supplies. Come check us out today.
And if pets could talk, they would talk about us. Motley, give them me number.
774 5977 and 349 6225.
Well, once you hear that kind of music, you have to bop your head a little bit. Good evening and welcome. First of all, I expect that you may have been looking forward, even expecting to hear the much more soothing voice than mine of Miss Ingrid Melville. However, Miss Melville advised us yesterday that she was not able to do the program, so I had to sit in. Me sitting in means a reunion of sorts with my one-time host, Mr. Kamau Akili. So this is going to be fun. The question of self-government, as I have always discussed it, to me should not be a question that ever closes. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have a Law Review Commission. And the Law Review Commission sat from when the country came into being and continues to sit on an ongoing basis, continually reviewing and updating laws. And if you're really talking about the question of Tobago and its governance and its relationship to Trinidad, maybe it is something that we should always be engaged with. Of course, there would be the inflection points when laws are changed and all that kind of stuff. But this is not an issue that has, in my view, an opening day and a closing day. So nonetheless, we continue. We'll probably broaden our debate, include quite a few more things than what the basics are within the context of the law. So let me say good evening. It is now just after 8 p.m. and you're tuned to Radio Tambrin over Tobago and Trinidad. You can participate in this program by WhatsApp on 718-4927 and on the telephone by 635-DRUM, 635-BAGO, 639-3392. Kamau Akili is on Zoom, and let me say good evening to him and welcome, and there might be one or two things that he wants to get out of the way before we get into the meat of the matter. Good evening, brother.
Good evening, Mr. Leacock.
How are
good
you?
Evening to the listening audience of Radio Tambrin. It's been a while, but it's good to be here with you. It's just that it's not morning, no, it's night. But nonetheless, let me thank you for the opportunity for sharing this evening. And to start off, well, let me start by saying that I believe my participation here tonight would have had its genesis in my submission to the Parliament, not the Joint Select Committee, but the full Committee of Parliament that was established after the report of the Joint Select Committee was adopted by the Parliament, by the House of Representatives. They would have established a full committee and asked for anybody who had further comments to submit. And based on all that had gone before, I would have submitted comments to that committee of the full House. So these comments would not have been included in the comments that went to the Joint Select Committee. But I felt the need, after reviewing everything, to put these comments forward.
Right.
Let me start off by saying that to make it clear, I support the proposals that are now before the House of Representatives. They do not contain in totality the things that I wish to see, but I think there have been sufficient improvement in terms of the proposals for Tobago autonomy that I can support it. There are some elements of it that have been long-standing and vexatious that needed to be treated with. In particular, the issue of cabinet having the power to override the Tobago House of Assembly in terms of policy decisions for matters for which the THA is supposed to have responsibility under the relevant schedule of Act 40 of 1996. This is a matter that the THA would have sought to treat with through the courts, and they failed. And so I was happy, for example, to see that change being made so that Cabinet can no longer override the THA in terms of those policy decisions. So this is an example of an improvement. The issue of independent councillors being appointed, that is something that I would have called for a long time ago. That was also asked for by Chief Secretary Orville London way back in, I think it was 2012, when you had the 12-0 victory by the PNM. So those are some things that I see as improvements. And also the idea of a declaration that Tobago is of equal status to Trinidad in this arrangement. But that is just a declaration. I will come back to that in terms of my substantive submission. Because it's one thing to say that we are of equal status, but how do we make that live in reality? Well, and that to me is a fundamental issue.
So that your essential kicking off position is the bill is an improvement, but you still feel that it does not go far enough.
Yeah, it doesn't go far enough. Mm-hmm. I can live with it because this is a process of engagement, a process of negotiation, and I believe it's something that will continue long after you and I are no longer here to discuss things on the program. When we look at the history of other areas of the world, you know, Scotland is spoken about a lot as an example of trying to get more and more autonomy. So these kinds of discussions will continue. I have no doubt as Trinidad and Tobago evolves as a society.
But your contention in terms of not going far enough has to do with the historic issue, and that being of revenue sharing as far as hydrocarbons are concerned. And as I recall in your statement, the important issue to be resolved is that the notion held by people that Tobago is a burden on the national treasury. Tobago does not contribute to the national treasury. And in a sense, on each and every occasion, Tobago is required to go to Trinidad to get something where Trinidad has absolute discretion about what you get, how many of them you get, and when you get them.
Yes, Mr. Leacock. My view is that there has not been an accounting for the contribution of Tobago to the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. Let me start with the Union of Trinidad and Tobago. This union was started in 1888 for reasons that had to do with economic decline across the Caribbean. In most of the British colonies, there were attempts made to unify administrations. So the first attempt to unify Trinidad and Tobago was in 1888, where Tobago was unified with Trinidad, but Tobago was still to have its own legislative council and its own revenue collection and so on. That didn't work out, and therefore in 1898, you had the Union of Trinidad and Tobago, with Tobago being established as a ward of the colony of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to make a distinction because over the years, people have been saying Tobago was made a colony of Trinidad. That is not so. In fact, before me, I have a copy of the order in council of 1898 that says Tobago is a ward of the colony of Trinidad and Tobago. And this order of council of the 17th of November 1798.
But I wonder if that statement is colored by the statement that was once made by the father of the nation, to use that term, Eric Williams, when he said that Tobago exchanged British colonialism for Trinidad colonialism. Remember that statement came up at a particular point in time, which was intended to do any whatever.
It could have been. It could have been, and it is something that has been repeated because I've looked at official documentation, especially coming from our national archives, that repeat the same mistake, that Tobago was a ward of the colony of Trinidad. It's Trinidad and Tobago. And also, a person seems to misunderstand the meaning of the term ward. It was not a dependency. A ward is an administrative district. There's a history behind that. Right? Wards were administrative districts, not only in Britain, but in other parts of the world. Wards have now become electoral districts.
And a ward was administrated over by a warden.
By a warden.
My first interaction with governance as a young man was going to the warden's office to get a bicycle license access form.
Right, and that was, and largely the warden would have been responsible for revenue collection. So you go to the warden to pay your taxes, to pay your various licenses, customs duties, etc., etc. Right, so that clarification has to be made because it has led to Tobagonians being perceived, or Tobago being perceived as being inferior to Trinidad. And Tobagonians suffering that psychological disadvantage. And it's real. That psychological advantage of coming from Tobago and you are an inferior state or inferior part of the nation of Trinidad and Tobago because you're subjected to Trinidad. You know, that idea that has existed over the years. Now, the bill before Parliament has sought to address that by saying we are equal in status and so on, right? But it doesn't go far enough. Okay? So I wanted to address that issue. Tobago was never a ward of Trinidad. Tobago was a ward of the colony of Trinidad and Tobago, with being a ward being an administrative district. The ward system had not yet been established for the whole of Trinidad and Tobago, but eventually it was established in 1927 when you had the act to divide Trinidad, where Trinidad was divided into counties and the counties were divided into wards. That was done in 1927. So you had the county council system being established, and Tobago was eventually made a county under that same system. So you had the county of Tobago, county of Nariva, county of Naparima, etc., etc. Right? So that is the understanding of ward. Not a dependency, but an administrative district.
All right.
And that should put to rest this whole idea of Tobago being subjected to Trinidad.
By the end of the day, so let me tell you a story. A gentleman with whom I worked at Shaw Park, I met him a few weeks ago, and I promise I will tell his story. He said that when he was a young man and he finished school and all of that, well, what next? So his father got a job for him with a tradesman. And he went out as the apprentice of the tradesman. He worked for the fortnight, and he noticed the tradesman and gave him no money. But in those days, the power gradient was so steep, you can't ask the tradesman that may go home. So when he goes home, he meets his father. He says, Daddy, I work with Mr. Thomas for the whole week and he ain't pay me. And his father turned and say, you went to Mr. Thomas for work? He said, well, no, Daddy, you went to Mr. Thomas to do work for me. He said, well, Mr. Thomas pay me. I have the money. Right? He said, so the next fortnight, he practicing dovetail joint and all kind of thing, any little piece of wood that they have, he practicing because he realizes that he have to make a transition from being the person that his father sent to work with Mr. Thomas, to be an employee of Mr. Thomas. So he said, as about the third day in the third week, boy, he get a chance to make a dovetail joint. So he make the dovetail joint, and as he snap it in, Mr. Thomas said, wait, you could do this trade? And he said from that weekend, he started to get paid. Right? So then now he said he could walk home like a man. And he give his father some money and he give his mother some money to help with things home. That's the issue. And the question of oil, I don't know that necessarily it should be reduced to whether you're going out in the sea with a bucket and dip up the oil and all that kind of stuff. If there's acceptance that Tobago's contribution to the archipelagic state, like you say in your document, results in there being greater resources available to Trinidad and Tobago, that is the question and that is the answer. How do you suggest that that mathematical, geographical reality be translated to a bill of draft or an element of the relationship that treats with this question, the question that you first raised, Tobago being mendicant in the circumstance?
Okay, Mr. Leacock. Trinidad and Tobago is an archipelagic state under the international law of the Sea Convention, meaning we are a chain of islands. And being an archipelagic state means that we can claim a maritime exclusive economic zone of 200 miles, basically, from our shorelines. Those resources, whether in the water, on the seafloor, under the seafloor, are under the control of Trinidad and Tobago. It means as an archipelago, Tobago is dependent on Trinidad for having that 200 mile, and Trinidad is dependent on Tobago to access that 200 miles. Trinidad by itself will not be an archipelagic state. Tobago by itself will not be an archipelagic state. So there's mutual interdependence of each island in terms of this exclusive economic zone. It stands to reason, therefore, that any revenues to be gained from this exclusive, from exploiting the resources of this exclusive economic zone should be attributed equally to the islands. As simple as that. In other words, those resources belong to the two of us. The revenues from it belong to the two of us. But we have a situation in terms of our economic discussion, our economic accounting, that when we speak about the revenues and the contribution of the islands to the revenues and even the GDP of Trinidad and Tobago, when we talk about Tobago, we talk about tourism and agriculture and so on. But when we talk about Trinidad, we talk about...
And there are plenty of banks over here and they do business and they make profit and all this kind of thing.
The banks and the insurance companies.
But you said a key word. You said a word, equality. Is it equality you said or equal? should be equally shared between the two islands. I want it
Not equally shared. Attributed.
Attributed equally.
Not shared.
Attributed equally. So maybe, well, my argument rotates then on attributed. So it's the first 20 minutes have gone, so we'll take a break. Well, it's 22 minutes past 8 o'clock now. We'll take a break now, and we'll come back and we'll start the discussion about the question of sharing.
Okay.
Police, good day. Officer Best Price here. Johnny Q, Auto Parts Division.
Yes, sir.
I'm here to investigate an assault on batteries.
Excuse me, sir?
Is it true you have batteries selling for $488?
Yes. Power Master, Optima, Vata, and Megastar batteries.
So I can buy a battery for $488?
Yes, sir. For cars, trucks, and boats. Backed and distributed by Massey Automotive.
Which part?
Right here at Johnny Q Hardware and Auto Parts Division, 15 Arrowbita Avenue, Woodbrook. And our new Johnny Q Superstore, located at Lowlands Mall off Claude Noel Highway in Tobago. You could call 63 Tools.
Alright, thanks, boss. Nah, man. Granny,
do you have $488 to lend me?
Want to have happy pets? Well, don't worry. The professionals are here. Healthy Pets exclusive boutique and farm animal supplies, located at Pan Am Building, Crown Point, is ready to serve you. Check us out for a variety of gorgeous accessories, fashionista outfits, grooming essentials, toys, potty training supplies, medication, and much more for your furry friends. Great prices on feeds and chows. It's a pet's world at Healthy Pets. Open weekdays 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Sundays and public holidays 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Come in, we'll make you feel happy too. Delivery options available. Healthy Pets exclusive pet boutique and farm animal supplies. Come check us out today.
And if pets could talk, they would talk about us. Motley, give them your number.
774 5977 and 349 6225.
Do you have problems remembering the most basic thing? Do you have an upcoming exam and you want to do well? Do you want to improve your memory, concentration, and mental sharpness? Use Gink Gold by Nature's Way. Gink Gold is specially formulated and clinically proven to increase blood circulation to the brain and extremities, improving your memory, mental sharpness, and concentration. Have a better future with improved memory. Use Gink Gold by Nature's Way.
Available at all leading pharmacies and health food stores nationwide. Distributed by H&J Enterprises. Telephone 662-5419.
So we're back. We're talking to Kamau Akili Talk Night, discussing the relationship between Trinidad and Tobago from the point of view of natural resources available to Trinidad and Tobago. We are arguing as a result of Tobago existing. If Tobago cut loose, pull up the anchor and sail away to Grenada. If that were possible, then you have a different kind of discourse. But we physically in a particular space, and we are where we are. Can't move.
Yes, Mr. Leacock, the geographic contribution of Tobago to the archipelago, puts us in a position where we can say that we are contributing a significant amount of revenue jointly with Trinidad to the purses of Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, we need to change the narrative of Tobago being economically dependent on Trinidad. And that can happen without any gas coming to Tobago, any oil passing through Tobago. We see the case in Guyana. What is happening there with the oil industry? No gas passes through Guyana, no oil. It is exploited out at sea and exported. Tobago is more fortunate because we have natural gas landing in Tobago, and that provides certain opportunities that we really need to exploit as an island in terms of our manufacturing and tourism and so on. There's a lot you can do with the natural gas landing in Tobago, but that's a different discussion right now. We're talking about, Tobago's contribution. Having determined that Tobago is contributing significantly to the revenues of Trinidad and Tobago, the issue of sharing comes up. I leave that to the economist, Mr. Leacock. I don't know how much Tobago share should be. I think sharing should be as a nation in terms of what a region of the nation needs to further its development. What Tobago needs, I am not sure. We do not have, for example, a 5-year plan that is costed that would say, okay, over the next 5 years, we would need X amount of money to put this plan into place and so on. In the absence of that type of planning and that type of costing, I am not in a position to make any suggestion in terms of sharing and percentages. All I'm saying is that
somebody said to me, I didn't hear it from him directly. Yeah. I heard there was a $10 on every 100. And I suppose there are two ways to treat with things of this nature. One is you get the actuaries in and you do a scientific thing and you reduce it and you multiply it and you square it and all that kind of thing. And then you come up with a number. Or you pull a number out of a hat that is reasonable. So let's say that Tobago is 4% of the population, but Tobago is significantly behind Trinidad in development. So you're going to take your 4% and double it to give you a chance to catch up. We don't have to go over the car race story again, or maybe we should. If me and you racing with a car from Mount St. George, from Roxborough to Tongue, and halfway we decide that your car faster than mine, we can't level the cars now. We have to exchange cars and give me the faster car a chance to catch up. So just pull a number like that. Is that option?
How much do you need to catch up? There has to be some calculations. There has to be some planning.
But with COVID and world uncertainty and all that kind of thing, and you know I'm being deliberately mischievous here. COVID, world uncertainty, the fact that we don't have before us a rollout of a recovery plan or anything like that. What we want is resources in our back pocket and intelligence and knowledge so that when we see an opportunity, we're able to grab it. If we find out tomorrow morning that red rock is made of rare earth and we have to go and scrape down red rock and sell it, we have the resources to do it. But let me push another idea to you. What about if we compartmentalize our budgets differently and we put development funding by itself, recurrent expenditure by itself, and not in particular put things like building community center and health center and all that kind of thing among development expenditure, put those things as social infrastructure and save the notion of development expenditure for those items that are intended to make money. Cove Industrial Estate, I don't know who we're going to name it of, Cecil Anthony, or Sullivan Dillon Marina, so that those things that are bankable, you put those as development, and paving roads and all that kind of thing, social infrastructure.
Yes, Mr. Leacock, I could live with that arrangement. But basically what you are saying is that you want to have dedicated investment that would show a economic return.
Yes. And I'm saying that some portion of those funds should maybe go to that so that over time you increase the capacity of Tobago to fund its own development.
Yes, I agree. The economy of Tobago needs to be developed. The economy of Tobago needs to be diversified, right, into all areas possible, whether it be the primary industries, secondary industries, or tertiary industries. We need to look at all the possibilities. We need to exploit all the opportunities, and funding should be available to do that.
All right, let me flip you in another direction historically. The last two chief secretaries of the Tobago House of Assembly signaled very clearly their concern about making Tobago a player in energy by, in the first instance, naming themselves Secretary of Energy. Orville London and Mr. Kelvin Charles did that, right? If they thought it important to do that, even if it was intended to send a signal, that signal has been sent. How then is it not something that was addressed in the Act?
I don't know that you have to address that specifically in the Act, Mr. Leacock. If Tobago is responsible for certain matters, then it would be up to once that decision is made, it would be up to the Tobago House of Assembly then to put the structures and so on in place. Tobago needs to have an energy policy, right? Outside of natural gas and oil, because of what is happening today in the world with climate change and so on. We need to look at how energy is going to be made available, how it's going to be generated in Tobago, right? Very seriously. It's something that way back when in around 1998, when I was at Environment Tobago, we started looking at, and we actually came up with some possible solar energy projects for Tobago. I know Tiantec was looking at some renewable energy projects. There, this windmill up in Hope, where they were doing some experiments and so on. Mm-hmm. So there is need for an energy policy and an energy plan for Tobago. That will include energy from natural gas and oil. But at this present point in time, because of the need to reduce dependence on natural gas and oil, to provide energy, to reduce the impacts of climate change, we have to go the route eventually of renewable energy. And we really need to have a serious focus on that at this point in time.
But isn't the reality that we're going to have to finance the switch over to renewable sources by, in particular, natural gas? Isn't that just a reality that we have to do? Because I know there are a lot of cases where they're talking, for example, that in some cases they have found that at certain stages of the development, the amount of hydrocarbons that you burn in order to do the green option erases the green option gains. But the argument is now, well, that's not a big thing because that's a temporary transitional stage, no?
Yes, because if you look at the manufacturing of solar cells, for example, the amount of energy that has in the past gone into manufacturing solar cells, and that energy would have come from fossil fuel, was significant. Mm-hmm. But now with improvements of the process and increasing the availability of solar cells, you can now start to use solar cell energy to manufacture new solar cells.
Yeah, it's like when you buy a pack of knives, right? You buy a pack of knives, right. A brand new kitchen when you get home. How you open the pack to get out the first knife? that is exactly the challenge that you have. But we have been singing this song since I, in my own time, could remember since the 70s. Diversification of the economy and so on. People are saying that at one time, electricity was too cheap in Trinidad and Tobago, so it didn't make sense to go solar and all that kind of stuff. All of it belying the realities that we see now rolled out in front of us. Most of the major manufacturers in the world are now have now told us when they're going to make the last gasoline vehicle. right? I've heard companies giving times as early as 2030, 2035. After that, we're not making any more gasoline vehicles. My brother told me a story that I said incorrectly on air last week, and I this is a great opportunity to correct it. He got himself into an electric car, and he drove from Guelph to Montreal. I think it's 700 miles round trip, and it cost him $70, 70 Canadian dollars, right, in fuel. A trip of 700 miles in Canada on gasoline is an upwards of $300 story, if not more than that. Right? Depending on what kind of vehicle you're driving. Because, vehicle miles, they give you the best miles for a gallon on the highway, right? But that's never more than 30 miles a gallon. Right? So, so that is a very expensive undertaking. So, and his response to that is, I'm never going to have another car with gas. Right? That's the end of the story. I tell my own story with batteries. When I started flying model helicopters, a first model helicopter battery I bought, and I just could only afford to buy one, was 200 Canadian dollars. The last model battery I bought is between $35 and $40, and it had twice the power and lasted twice as long. So it cost a quarter the price and gave you twice as much use. So there's huge improvements going on in their areas. Is there a direct way for us to transfer our blessing of fossil fuels into any leg of manufacturing of green products, green energy products?
Yes, we can. In Tobago, for example, at Cove, we have electricity, we have natural gas. Those are forms of energy that we can initially put into manufacturing batteries, manufacturing solar cells, manufacturing inputs into green energy. The option is available still.
What comparative advantages we have for doing those things in our space?
I am not sure what the comparative advantages are. We have some disadvantages in terms of doing these things on a large scale. We do not have, for example, port, a commercial port, containerized port that would allow for large scale movement of materials if you're doing these things on a large scale, right? But we do have cheap electricity. And we have relatively cheap natural gas at our disposal. And energy is a significant input into manufacturing of some of these things.
So
we do have some advantage.
All right. So that we have agreed on those two things, we'll take a break again. After the break, we will accept your participation by any of the means. That would be by telephone, by the internet, by Facebook, or any of the things that comes to mind for you. But let me say that when we come back after the break, we'll talk about how can we translate those desires into maybe the next round of attempts to come up with a law. Do we need to go to Trinidad and campaign to get support on that side of the water or whatever? You listen to Talk Night on Radio Tambrin, the inaugural program. Stay tuned for when the next program will take place. We take a break now and we'll be back.
Rifle Master the tire Alex, but the tires them cheap. Tires for your van, for your car, for your Jeep. Price and service, so them cannot compete. Cause you know how tire Alex them do it. Well, 9 o'clock in the morning, as me touch road, me drop down in a pothole. But me never worry, tire Alex have it under control. That's why me I deal with the pros.
Times are tough during this pandemic, but have no fear. Rifle Master is open and has the best hyper prices and service in Tobago. Rifle Master is more than just a tire center. It's more like a tire spa. Kick back and enjoy our free refreshment and free Wi-Fi while you wait.
Only at Rifle Master Tire Center, located inside George Street near Penny Savers, Canaan, Tobago.
Call the Rifle Master hotline at 660-TIRE.
Follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Where does the energy come from to be buried in leaves? Become someone's horse, give someone flight, or chase life's treasures? What does it take to feel fully alive? Introducing Alive, a complete and potent multivitamin packed with over 20 fruits and vegetables and extra B vitamins for energy. Alive, a whole new kind of multivitamin that brings energy to life.
Where do we begin? How do we start going back to normal? We starting back with a new normal. Say hygiene is our closest friend. So we begin planting a garden, crops with social distancing, and support the vendor who's selling something. And so we go out and don't forget to mask it. Stand in your spot at the supermarket. Tomatoes, lettuce, potatoes, you could get that by the parlor too. Bringing back a village right by you. Support is like the good old days. We need to go back to make a change. Support local.
So we're back. Kamau Akili is our guest. Kamau, how we gonna make this part of the law? And we'll take your telephone calls on 635 Drum, 635 Bago, 639-3392. What's
I'm
up?
not sure that you need to change the law to attribute Tobago's contribution to the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. That doesn't need a law.
So what needs?
That's to do how we prepare our national accounts. But it is a recognition. And that recognition is important because it removes the perception that Tobago is not contributing much to the economy of Trinidad and Tobago.
Listen, I have heard a number of the Prime Minister, individual ministers, when Shamfa Kodjo gets a swing at it, she goes really hard. I recall the Minister of Finance going really hard against somebody who questioned the funding for the Tobago Heritage Festival. And that person said, how come you could be giving so much money to the Tobago House of Assembly for Heritage Festival? And Colin Bird said, I wish I could give them more. Anyway, we have a caller. Caller, good night.
Pleasant good night.
Good night to you.
Good night.
I didn't hear any mention made about the Dispute Resolution Commission.
Dispute Resolution Commission, the DRC, an element of the existing Tobago House of Assembly.
How would line up that with the Joint Select Committee?
All right. We'll discuss it. Thanks for your call. Thanks for your call. I looked at the report of the JSC. I don't remember as we speak right now of them saying that they studied the various Dispute Resolution Commission reports. I don't know if that formed a part of their debate, but I think we could pretty much assume that it did. Just because we talked about percentages and all that kind of stuff. So we pretty much assume that they did, no?
Well, there's reference in the reports to the DRC and proposals
Yeah,
therein.
so you can assume. You can assume.
So we can assume, but reference to the DRC would only come when there is disagreement in terms of allocation.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but I haven't been speaking to what the allocation to Tobago should be. I am still speaking to recognizing Tobago's true contribution in the first instance. So we talk about contribution, and then afterwards we talk about what's a fair share of the
So
time.
when you say do it without a law,